The night air was cold and heavy with silence. As Jack drove his old pickup truck down the long, empty road, his tired hands gripped the steering wheel, and his eyes fought to stay open after a long day at the small auto repair shop, where he worked since morning. His shirt was still stained with oil, and his mind was filled with thoughts of his little daughter Emma, waiting at home with her small lamp on, reading one of her favorite bedtime books. The road ahead was dark, with only a few flickering street lights far apart, and every few seconds the sound of the engine was the only thing breaking the quiet. He was thinking about how he would tuck Emma in and maybe share a small laugh before she closed her eyes, when suddenly something caught his attention on the right side of the road. He slowed down a little and saw a car stopped awkwardly near the curb, its hazard lights blinking in the night like desperate signals for help. Beside it, on the cold, hard ground, sat a young girl no older than 16. She had her knees pulled close to her chest and her face buried in her hands. Jack felt a strange pull in his heart, and for a moment he thought about driving past, telling himself someone else would stop, but then he saw the way her shoulders shook, and how her hair hung loose and messy, as if she had been there for a while. The road was empty, and no other cars seemed to be coming. Jack eased his foot on the brake and pulled over a few feet ahead. When he stepped out of his truck, the air felt colder. The gravel crunched under his boots as he walked toward her. She did not look up until he spoke. His voice was gentle but steady as he said, "Hey, are you all right?" She lifted her head slowly, and Jack saw her eyes, red and swollen from crying, her cheeks wet with tears. She sniffed and tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "I just need to get home. Please, no one will stop for me." Her words were soft, almost broken, and Jack could hear the fear and helplessness in them. He looked at the car and noticed one side leaning lower than the other, a completely flat tire, the kind that would not go anywhere without a spare. Jack asked if she had one. She shook her head and looked down as if ashamed. He asked if she had called her parents. She hesitated for a moment and then muttered, "They're busy." Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing at her phone as if waiting for a message that never came. The wind blew stronger now, making the night feel sharper. Jack told her to wait in the truck so she could stay warm, but she refused, saying she wanted to stay close to her car. Jack opened the back of his pickup and took out his old but trusted toolbox. He knelt down by the wheel and started working, using his flashlight to see clearly. He could feel her eyes watching him the whole time, but she said nothing. As he loosened the bolts and removed the damaged tire, Jack tried to make small conversation, asking her name. She said it was Chloe, her voice barely above a whisper. She explained that she had been driving back from a friend's place when the tire gave out and she could not reach anyone for help, so she decided to wait by the road, hoping someone would pass by. Jack thought about how many people must have driven past without stopping, and it made him tighten his jaw in quiet frustration. After some effort, Jack finished replacing the tire with a spare he had in his truck. It was not a perfect fit, but would get her home safely. He stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and told her it was done. She reached into her bag and asked how much she owed him. Jack shook his head and said, "No charge, just get home safe." Chloe looked at him with wide eyes, as if she could not believe he was serious. There was a pause, then she gave a small smile, though her eyes still looked sad. She whispered, "Thank you. You did not have to stop." Jack just shrugged and told her it was nothing. Chloe's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she walked to her car. She hesitated at the door, turned back, and said something that made Jack raise his eyebrows. "You will hear from me soon." Her tone was strange, not a warning, but almost like a promise. Jack stood there for a moment, watching as she drove off into the darkness, her car lights disappearing into the night. He shook his head and thought about how strange the whole encounter had been as he climbed back into his pickup and started driving again. He did not know that the next morning a single phone call would turn this small act of kindness into something that would change his life forever. The cold night was still in Jack's mind as he drove home after helping Chloe. The sound of the wind against the truck and the steady hum of the engine made his thoughts wander back to her face. The way her eyes looked lost, yet hopeful. When he said she could go without paying, the words she spoke before leaving echoed again in his head, "You will hear from me soon." It felt strange, like there was something more behind those words, something he could not quite understand. The next morning, Jack woke early to prepare breakfast for Emma. The little kitchen smelled of toast and eggs, and the small radio on the counter played soft music. Emma sat at the table, swinging her feet and telling Jack about a drawing she wanted to make for school. Jack smiled and listened, but part of his mind was still on the girl from last night. He wondered if she made it home safely, and why she had been alone in such a quiet and dark place. After dropping Emma at school, Jack headed to the garage, where he worked. The shop smelled of tires and gasoline, and the sound of clanking metal filled the air. As the other mechanics were already busy with customers, Jack got to work fixing an old van, but between tasks, he found himself thinking again about Chloe and her strange reaction. When he refused payment, most people would simply say thank you and leave, but her look had been different, almost like she had never met someone who helped without wanting something back. Later that afternoon, when the shop was quieter, Jack stepped outside to get some air. The winter sky was pale and heavy with clouds. As he leaned against the side of the building, a memory of her phone kept flashing in his mind. She kept checking it, almost like she was afraid of missing something important. He remembered how her clothes looked expensive and clean except for the mud on her shoes, which seemed odd. Maybe she had walked somewhere before the car broke down. Maybe there was more to her story than she told him. Jack shook his head and told himself not to overthink it. Maybe she was just a rich kid who got stuck on the road and did not want to call her parents, but still the feeling would not go away. That night, after closing the shop, Jack drove to pick up Emma from a friend's house. They sang along to the radio and laughed about silly things until they reached home. Once Emma was asleep, Jack sat in the living room with a cup of coffee. He stared at the phone for a while, half expecting it to ring, but it stayed quiet. The memory of Chloe's voice whispering, "You will hear from me," soon felt heavier now, as if it carried a meaning he had not yet seen. The next day passed like any other. Jack fixed cars, changed oil, and replaced old parts, yet something unusual happened in the afternoon. A man in a dark suit came into the garage, his shoes polished, his hair neat. He walked straight to Jack without looking around and asked, "Are you Jack Miller?" Jack wiped his hands and nodded. The man handed him a small white envelope and said, "This is for you," then turned and left without another word. Jack opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note written in elegant handwriting. It read, "Thank you for last night. You were the only one who stopped to help. I will make sure you hear from me again soon, Chloe." There was no phone number, no address, just the note. Jack stood there holding it as the cold breeze from the open shop door brushed against his face. He folded the note and put it in his jacket pocket, unsure what to think. Maybe she really meant what she said. Maybe she wanted to send him a thank you gift. But why the mystery? Why the man in the suit? He decided to keep it to himself, not even telling Emma. That evening, Jack and Emma had dinner together. They talked about her day at school and a project she was excited about. After she went to bed, Jack sat alone in the quiet house, the ticking of the clock. The only sound his mind was restless, trying to piece together why a girl like Chloe would send a note like that instead of just calling or visiting. Part of him felt curious, part of him felt cautious. As he got ready to sleep, Jack looked out the small window near his bed. The road outside was empty and silent, but for some reason he could not shake the feeling that someone somewhere was watching and waiting. Maybe Chloe, maybe someone connected to her. He could not know yet, but deep down he sensed that whatever was coming next would not be simple, and it would not be small. The air in the room felt heavier. As he lay down and closed his eyes, he tried to think only about Emma and tomorrow's work, but the image of Chloe sitting alone by the road in the cold kept coming back to him. The way she held herself, the sadness in her eyes, the strange promise in her voice. Jack did not know it yet, but the note in his jacket was only the first small sign of something much bigger that was already on its way. The morning sun was just starting to shine through the thin curtains in Jack's small kitchen. When he poured himself a cup of coffee, the smell filled the room. As Emma sat at the table eating toast and humming a tune from a cartoon she liked, Jack smiled at her. But his mind was still caught on the note he had received from Chloe the day before. The words were simple, but the way they were written, the elegant curves of the letters, and the mystery behind them made him feel like something was about to happen. After dropping Emma at school, Jack returned to the garage. The day started as usual with customers bringing in cars for repairs. The sound of engines, the smell of fuel, and the clinking of tools filled the air. Jack kept busy, but every now and then he would touch his jacket pocket where the note still rested, folded neatly. He had read it so many times he could almost see the words without looking at it. It was mid-morning when Jack's phone rang, the sharp sound cutting through the noise of the garage. He pulled it from his pocket and looked at the screen. The number was unknown. His first thought was it might be a customer, but when he answered, a calm, strong female voice spoke. "Mr. Jack Miller, this is Victoria Sterling. I believe you helped my daughter last night." Jack froze for a moment. The name was familiar. Victoria Sterling was one of the wealthiest women in the country, owner of a company worth billions. Her face had been on magazines and TV more times than he could count. Hearing her name made him straighten his back without even thinking. Jack replied slowly, saying, "Yes, ma'am, I helped a girl named Chloe. She had a flat tire and seemed upset. I just wanted to make sure she got home safely." Victoria's voice was smooth, but carried a certain weight that made it impossible to ignore. She said, "Chloe told me about you. She said you stopped even though you did not know her. You refused payment, and you treated her with kindness not because you wanted something, but because you cared." Jack said it was nothing really, but Victoria's tone became serious. "Mr. Miller, I would like to meet you in person today, if possible." Jack hesitated, unsure why a billionaire would want to meet him over something so small. Before he could ask, she continued, "I think you will want to hear what I have to say. I can have a car pick you up within the hour." Jack glanced around the garage, his co-workers busy with their tasks. The idea of leaving in the middle of the day felt strange, but something in her voice told him this was important. He agreed to meet her and hung up the phone. His hands were slightly trembling as he set it down. Exactly 1 hour later, a black luxury car pulled up outside the garage, its polished surface shining under the pale winter sun. The driver stepped out in a dark suit and opened the door for Jack. The ride into the city felt longer than usual, though the traffic was light. Jack sat quietly looking out the window, watching the streets change from small neighborhoods to tall glass buildings. They stopped in front of a towering skyscraper with golden letters at the top reading Sterling Global. The driver led Jack through the grand entrance into a lobby with marble floors and high ceilings. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. A receptionist greeted him with a warm but professional smile and guided him to a private elevator that rose smoothly to the top floor. When the doors opened, Jack stepped into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. The view was breathtaking, but his eyes went straight to the woman standing by the desk. Victoria Sterling was dressed in a tailored dark blue suit, her hair perfectly styled, her posture confident yet graceful. She smiled slightly as she walked forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming," she said, her voice exactly as it had sounded on the phone. "I know this may seem unusual, but I want to speak to you face to face. Chloe has been through a difficult time lately, and you were the first person in a long while to show her simple kindness without any expectations." Jack nodded, unsure what to say. Victoria studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk, and continued, "I have a proposal for you, Mr. Miller, but it is not just about money. It is about something bigger, something that could change your life and my daughter's life as well." Jack's pulse quickened. He sat back in the chair, trying to read her expression, but her eyes were calm and unreadable. He felt both curious and cautious, unsure whether to lean in or pull away from whatever she was about to say. Victoria paused, as if weighing her next words. Then she smiled again, but this time there was something deeper in her gaze, a mix of determination and hope. She said, "I think you might be exactly the kind of person I have been searching for a very long time." Jack sat across from Victoria Sterling in the large, bright office, the walls made of glass, giving a clear view of the city far below. The sunlight poured in and reflected off the polished table between them, but Jack could not take his eyes off the woman in front of him. She was calm, her voice steady, yet carrying a certain power. Every word she spoke felt measured and deliberate. She began by thanking him again for helping Chloe, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She told him that her daughter had been going through a very difficult year, and that night when Jack stopped on the road meant more to Chloe than he could imagine. Chloe had told her mother that in that moment she felt safe and cared for without fear of judgment or demands. Jack listened quietly, unsure why a billionaire would spend her time telling him something like this. Victoria seemed to sense his uncertainty and leaned slightly closer, saying, "Mr. Miller, I know you might be wondering why you are here, and I will get to that soon. But first I want you to understand that what you did is rare in my world. In the circles I move in, people often help because they expect something in return, and that is not what you did. You acted simply out of kindness, and that is exactly the kind of character I value." Jack nodded, but his mind was spinning. He was just a small-town mechanic who fixed cars to make a living. The idea that his small act could matter so much to someone like her felt strange and almost unreal. Victoria reached for a folder on her desk and slid it toward him. Inside were photographs of various community centers, youth programs, and charity events. She explained that she had been funding projects for years, but felt something was missing. She wanted these programs to have leaders with genuine compassion, not just people with impressive resumes. She said Chloe needs more than the safety of wealth. She needs to see the world through people like you, people who know what struggle is, who understand what it means to work hard and care for others. Without expecting a reward, she told him she believed he could play a role in shaping a new project. She had been planning one that could help not only Chloe, but many other young people. Jack felt a mix of surprise and doubt. He had never been part of anything so big. He asked her what exactly she was offering. Victoria smiled faintly and replied, I am offering you the chance to lead one of my new community outreach programs. I want you to work closely with young people, teach them skills, guide them, and show them the kind of kindness you showed my daughter. I will provide the resources, the funding, and the support you need. He leaned back in his chair thinking about the offer. It sounded like something important, something meaningful, but also something far outside his comfort zone. He told her he was not sure if he was the right person for such a job. He fixed cars. He was not a teacher or a leader. Victoria looked at him steadily and said, leadership is not about titles or degrees. It is about example and character. And you have both. You cared enough to stop on a dark road for a stranger. And that is the kind of person I trust to make a difference. The room was silent for a moment except for the faint hum of the city far below. Victoria finally stood and walked to the window, gesturing for Jack to join her. The view was vast, the street small and distant. She said, from up here, everything looks so far away, and yet every person down there has their own story, their own struggles. I want you to help me reach them one by one. Jack looked at the city, then back at her. He felt the weight of what she was asking, not just the responsibility, but the possibility that this could change his life, and Emma's life too. Still, he could not give an answer, yet it was too big, too sudden. Victoria turned to face him again, and her voice softened. She said, I am not asking you to decide right now. Take the day to think about it. Talk to your daughter, if you wish, but I will need your answer tomorrow morning. Jack agreed to think it over, and soon the meeting was over. The driver was waiting downstairs to take him home. As he rode back through the busy streets, Jack stared out the window, thinking about Emma, about the garage, about the quiet life he had known until now, and about the strange turn of events that had started with a flat tire on a lonely road. When he reached his small house, Emma ran to the door to hug him, her smile bright and warm. He hugged her back, and for the first time that day, he felt grounded again. Still, as he sat down for dinner with her, the offer echoed in his mind over and over: the city, the programs, the possibility of doing something greater than he had ever imagined. That night, Jack lay awake listening to the quiet. He knew tomorrow he would have to choose, and whatever choice he made, there would be no going back. Jack woke early the next morning, his thoughts still tangled from the meeting with Victoria Sterling. The room was dim and quiet except for the faint sound of Emma breathing softly in her bedroom. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, his hands clasped together, thinking about what this offer could mean for their lives. The smell of coffee soon filled the kitchen, and Emma came out rubbing her eyes. She sat at the table with her cereal and began telling him about a dream she had. Jack smiled, but the weight of the decision pressed against him. He wanted to tell her everything, but part of him wondered if it was too soon. He decided to wait until after breakfast, when she was more awake and ready to listen. When the dishes were done, Jack sat across from her at the small table and began to explain. He told her about meeting Chloe on the road, about the note, and about the meeting in the tall glass building. He described Victoria Sterling and her offer to have him lead a program for young people. Emma listened quietly, her eyes wide as she tried to take it all in. Finally, she asked, will we still live here? Jack hesitated and said, maybe not if I take the job. She might want us to move to the city. Emma thought for a moment, then said in her simple, honest way, Dad, you always tell me that when we can help someone, we should, and if this job means you can help more people, I think you should do it. Her words made something in Jack's chest tighten, and he reached across the table to hold her hand. The rest of the morning moved slowly. Jack drove Emma to school and then headed to the garage, but his mind was not on the cars in front of him. He kept replaying Emma's words and the look in her eyes. He knew she would support him no matter what, but the fear of stepping into a completely different life was still there. It would mean leaving behind the familiar streets, the old garage, and the small circle of people he had known for years. By the afternoon, Jack made up his mind. He called the number Victoria had given him, and her assistant answered within seconds. After a brief moment, Victoria's voice came on the line, warm yet confident. Mr. Miller, have you made your decision? Jack took a breath and said, yes, I accept your offer. There was a pause on her end. Then she said, I am glad to hear that, Mr. Miller. I believe you will not regret this. I will have my team prepare everything for you and your daughter. We will arrange your move within the week. Jack hung up the phone feeling a mix of relief and nervous energy. He went back to his work, but nothing felt the same anymore. Every sound, every movement seemed sharper, like he was suddenly aware that his life was about to change in ways he could not fully imagine. That evening when he picked Emma up from school, she ran to the truck and climbed in, her smile wide. He told her the news that they would be moving and starting something new. She asked a dozen questions about the city, the new house, and the program he would be working on. Jack answered as best he could, though he did not yet know all the details himself. The next few days passed in a blur. Jack met with Victoria's team. They showed him plans for the outreach centers and introduced him to the staff who would be working with him. He learned about the different programs they would run, from teaching trade skills to offering counseling and mentorship. It was bigger than anything Jack had ever imagined, and it made him feel both excited and deeply responsible. Victoria met with him again in her office and told him more about why she had chosen him. She explained that Chloe had grown distant from the people in her world because she felt they only cared about appearances and wealth. She said your kindness showed her that there are still people who act from the heart, not from what they can gain. Jack listened and felt a quiet pride knowing that something so small as stopping to fix a flat tire could lead to this moment. Before he left her office that day, Victoria said, "One more thing, Mr. Miller. This is not just a job, it is a mission. And it will test you in ways you have not been tested before, but I believe you will rise to it. And when you do, you will change not only your life and Chloe's, but the lives of many others." Jack drove home thinking about her words. The road ahead felt uncertain, but also filled with possibility. Emma greeted him at the door, and they spent the evening packing a few boxes and talking about the new life that awaited them in the city. As the night grew quiet, Jack stood by the window looking out at the street where so much of his life had happened. Soon it would all be behind him. He knew the decision was made, and there was no turning back. Whatever lay ahead, it would begin now. And the thought sent a shiver down his spine, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing that sometimes one act of kindness can open a door you never knew existed. The morning of the move came sooner than Jack expected. The small house that had been his home for years now stood half empty, the furniture packed into boxes, the walls bare of the photos and little drawings Emma had made over the years. Jack walked through each room one last time, his steps slow, as he remembered the quiet nights, the laughter, the moments when he had wondered if life would ever change. Now it was changing faster than he could keep up with. Emma stood by the door, her small backpack on her shoulders. She was smiling, but Jack could see the hint of nervousness in her eyes. He told her everything would be fine, and that the city would bring new adventures. She nodded and gave him a quick hug before running out to the car. The driver sent by Victoria was already waiting. The black car seemed out of place on the small street, but somehow it felt like a bridge between their old life and the new one ahead. The ride into the city was quiet. At first, Emma pressed her face to the window, watching the buildings grow taller and the streets busier. Jack sat back thinking about how one night on a lonely road had led them here. He could still see Chloe's face in his mind, the way she had looked at him with surprise and hope that night, the moment that had set everything in motion. When they arrived, the driver pulled up to a tall modern building with wide glass doors. The lobby inside was bright and filled with plants and warm light. A woman from Victoria's team greeted them and showed them to their new apartment. It was larger than Jack expected, with big windows that looked out over the city streets below. Emma explored every corner, her voice echoing with excitement as she called out for Jack to come see each room. After they had settled in, Jack was taken to the first outreach center he would oversee. It was located in a busy part of the city, surrounded by small shops and neighborhoods. The building had been newly renovated with classrooms, workshops, and open spaces where young people could gather. Jack walked through the rooms, meeting staff members and volunteers, each one greeting him with warmth and curiosity about the man chosen by Victoria Sterling herself. In the days that followed, Jack threw himself into learning everything about the program. He met teenagers who came from difficult backgrounds, some who had lost their way, and others who were searching for something to believe in. He listened to their stories, helped them with small tasks, and began teaching basic car repair skills. In one of the workshops, he saw how their eyes lit up when they learned something new, and he felt a quiet satisfaction growing inside him. One afternoon, as Jack was finishing up a class, the door opened, and Chloe stepped inside. She was dressed simply, but her presence filled the room. The students looked at her with curiosity, but she smiled at them and walked straight to Jack. They stood for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "I told you you would hear from me again." Jack smiled and nodded. She thanked him once more for that night and told him she was glad her mother had brought him into their lives. Chloe began visiting the center often, sometimes helping with the classes, other times just sitting with the young people and talking. Jack noticed that she seemed different from the girl he had met on the road. She was more open, more willing to connect. It made him realize that this was not only about changing his life, but hers too. Weeks turned into months, and Jack grew more comfortable in his new role. He and Emma adapted to the city life, finding their favorite spots and making new friends. Emma often visited the center after school, helping out where she could and sharing her own kindness with the other kids. Jack watched her grow more confident, and he felt proud knowing they were building something meaningful together. One evening, Victoria visited the center. She walked through the rooms, speaking with the young people and watching the activities. When she found Jack, she told him she was proud of the work he had done and that this was only the beginning. She spoke of expanding the program to other cities and asked if he would be ready to help lead that effort. Jack agreed without hesitation, knowing now that this was where he belonged. Later that night, Jack and Emma sat by the window of their apartment, the city lights stretching out before them. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder and said, "I like it here, Dad." Jack smiled and said, "Me too." He thought back to the cold, dark road, the lonely girl, the simple choice to stop and help. It was hard to believe that such a small act had led them here, but he knew now that life could change in an instant when you opened your heart to someone in need. As they sat there in the quiet with the hum of the city below, Jack felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. Whatever the future held, he knew they would face it together, and he understood now more than ever that kindness was not just a choice, it was a path, and it was the path that had given them a new beginning.